I cut out.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Realities Podcast. My name is Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group, and today is a wild show. We have Tammy Nemeth. She is the head of the Nemeth Report in the UK, I believe, today. Welcome, Tammy.
Hello, everybody. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay. And then we have Irina Slav. Irina is one of the premier energy writers out of Bulgaria, and I'm one of her biggest fans out here. Good morning, Irina.
Good morning, Stu.
And then we have the energy absurdity of the day, David Blackman. He's out of Dallas, Texas. How are you today?
Oh, I'm just so happy to be here. I can hardly stand it. Feeling great.
Well, we thought about having Eeyore on the podcast today, but you answered the call. So let's get started here,
I'm in a good
folks.
mood.
Let's get started, folks. Statistical overview of world energy. And I'm going to go ahead and start this off. We've got some interesting things coming around the corner here. And Tammy, you had put this out there that this was a sign in the UK that you saw. Can you tell us about this?
Actually, I think it's in the United States, but it's this group that is, pushing back against the wind farms, and they put up this billboard, and I think it's really indicative of how they put the wind in swindle. Not clean, not green, not cheap. Absolutely.
I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, you can't spell swindle without wind, can you?
Exactly.
Oh, man. All right. And as always, we want to hear from everyone. So please fill out any questions or comments or heckling, and direct only nice things to me today because I'm in a little soft mode today. But as we take a look at the energy realities of what it is, this is out of Statista. Coal is still 35.51%. Natural gas is 22.4%. Hydro is 14. Now, I love me some hydro. Love hydro, but there is a little bit of a problem with hydro, and it's kind of weather dependent on also geographically dependent. Wind is 7.8, solar is 5.5. All right, bioenergy and other fuels. And so when we sit here and go, what is the war on oil when we're using coal and natural gas? Why are they going after oil?
Transportation.
Yeah, this is electricity production. Oil's transportation mainly, and
petrochemicals.
Right, and petrochemicals and fertilizers and all the good stuff that you have to feed the world.
Yeah.
Well, then when we take a look at the energy mix changes. This chart came from the Visual Capitalist. I like the guys over there.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
They do good stuff, and measured in MTOE, which is
metric tons of oil equivalent. Yeah.
Right. And when we sit back, based on the currency of frameworks, the first yellow one is oil will make up 28% of the global energy mix in 2040. The next one down reads for David, since you and I have the same eye problems here with age. Gas will increase nearly 30%, making it almost important for the energy mix. And coal is still going to be king.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Now that's based on 2018 promises.
Right.
And I think if you were to update this, because that's 6 years gone by, The European Union has done its ridiculous Green Deal. We've got the stuff going on in the United States, Canada, the other OECD countries. So I think this energy mix would be different if
How
you're
so?
basing it on stated policies, because they're making a lot of statements about things, and I think this is really great from a 2018 perspective, but I would like to compare that with a more recent assessment.
So, but nobody has made any of their commitments.
No.
So, did statements, none of the data would have changed because nobody has met any of their statements. Is that a fair statement?
That's why it would be so fascinating to compare them, right? Because they're making all of these tremendous statements, and we're going to do this by X date, whatever. And then you could see what progress has there been so far, right? And then compare it to, this is what they're saying 2040 will be like, and then this is what's actually transpired. I think that would be interesting.
You know, I think they've backed themselves into a corner. And Irina, you and I have laughed about hydrogen on our podcast before. And I'm seeing that their little ace in the hole is natural gas power plants that are hydrogen ready, and that's what they're going to be rolling out. But yet pipelines are not going to be available. They're not going to be put in. It's expensive. So they're just glossing this over, saying, look at us, we're good. What do you think about that?
Well, I really don't know what to say anymore because it's exhausting. They keep doing stupid things. Germany, I think, just got some money for hydrogen from the European Union this week. I forgot how much, but it wasn't a small sum. They still keep pushing in the same direction, even if reality keeps pushing back. And all these commitments that companies are making, they're starting to walk them back because they are realizing, shockingly, that they were unrealistic. I actually ranted about it on today's Substack. It's such a surprise. Companies were over enthusiastic, they were over optimistic. Nobody stopped to think when they set these targets of reducing emissions whether it was possible to really hit those targets. Same with hydrogen, same with wind and solar, same with everything.
Well, now in Canada, it's pretty much illegal to talk about what your transition plans are.
That's actually really smart if you think about it from a certain perspective. You're not allowed to talk about it, so you can do whatever you want.
Wow.
It's like Fight Club. To talk about it.
Yeah.
But David, does that fit into the lawfare that's going on? We just had a recent big California just is getting ready to do what the UK is doing and going after windfall profit taxes.
Yeah, well, California's going to California. That's what California does.
That's
and the biggest problem with California is 19 other states. You have laws in place that requires their agencies to follow California's lead. So what happens in California tends to become national policy fairly quickly. But the reality is, and in this statistical review of world energy, the reality is that the market continues to drive the energy mix. And as we see in this year's report, even though it's being done by more energy transition boosterish people than it used to be at BP when BP did this, you still have 80%, 81% of primary energy in 2023 provided by fossil fuels. Why? Because fossil fuels have an extremely high energy density. They're affordable. They're plentiful all over the world. And developing nations need them to develop their economies. The only places where use of fossil fuels has decreased are in the developed world, in the Western world, which is set itself on a path for whatever reason to become completely dependent on China for its energy security within the next 10, 15 years, unless something pretty dramatic changes in the political world. So, one of the most amazing statistics in this year's report is that India now uses more coal than Europe and the United States combined.
Whoa.
India, not China, India.
Yeah.
And
Makes
China
sense.
uses about 10 times as much as India. Well, everything we're doing in the West is a complete waste of money and time and energy because of those two countries. And they're not transitioning to anything. And in fact, even the authors of the report admit that it's a good case can be made that no transition is currently happening, which is what we've been saying on this podcast for 2 years now. This is not a transition. It's an innovation and an addition. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's the whole developing world where oil demand is rising. It has declined by, 0.8% in the US and a little bit more than that in Europe.
Yeah.
But this has been more than offset by rising demand in the developing world.
Right. And
Yeah,
we'll
I'm
continue
so glad
to
you
be.
mentioned that. Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
it will continue because those countries want their citizens, their voters, to live better. So they'll vote for them again.
Yeah, for sure.
All of this
And,
supports. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, David. Finish your thought.
Bjorn Lomborg, who is himself an environmentalist who believes in climate change and all this, is a strong advocate for a change in tactics here. That the human race, instead of tinkering around and trying to change the atmosphere, makeup of the atmosphere, and the weather, should do what humanity has always done well, and that is mitigate for a warming planet, for the prosperity.
And adapt.
Yeah.
Adapt.
And
Adapt.
adapt, which is what humans are good at, right? And, all of this, every bit of that new study that was put out last week argues in favor of that. We're embarked on a path that isn't going to work. The alternatives don't work. We all know it. They're not sufficient. They won't replace fossil fuels. And we're spending trillions of dollars on this. And it's a Don Quixote on a global scale, basically, and it's not going to work. So why don't we change tactics?
I like that. Dave, Tammy, I just found this. This is out of the EPA. And when you take a look at the energy mix that they're projecting, it's not plans like we were talking about, what is your stated plan? But this is what they think is going to happen to the energy mix. And when you take a look at black as being coal, data matters. And this is not going to happen because you see them saying by 2035, coal is going to go away. I don't see that happening.
Is this the United States?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what they're trying to do in the Biden administration to coal.
Yeah.
But if AI and these data centers are going to cause demand to double or triple during that time frame, quadruple by 2055,
right,
you're not going to be able to retire all these coal plants.
No,
that's not going to happen. You're going to have to build more of them.
And
so one of the things that was mentioned in this study, and we kind of commented on it in an email exchange before the show, was how they want to change how they collect information or something. I mean, it was a bizarre statement that over the coming months, we'll be engaging with users on further developments to ensure the way we measure and analyze energy keeps pace and stays relevant as the transition progresses from high to low carbon, from molecule to electron, from supply-led to demand-led. So what I'm wondering then is, what happens if these AI and data centers have independent power generating plants? So they go straight off a pipeline, they have a micro generator. Will they then say that isn't included in this power generation statistic, and therefore you could keep using coal, you could keep using natural gas, but it wouldn't show up on those statistics per se, because they're looking at maybe electricity generation in terms of a grid versus these little micro generators. And so that paragraph, that little sentence there gave me some pause. Is like, well, what do you mean you're going to change how you collect the data or analyze the data? What does that mean precisely? And then so this what they took over from BP, they're collaborating with KPMG and a consultancy named Kearney. And the KPMG person made this statement, and it reminded me of the Return of the Jedi when Darth Vader's on the Death Star. With record CO2 emissions as well in 2023, this recent data should serve as a timely reminder for the world to redouble efforts to reduce carbon emissions and reach net zero. Is this coming from the Emperor? They need to redouble their efforts to complete the Death Star?
It does sound fantastical, indeed. Because, okay, the climate is clearly changing. We have this sun, that gives us energy, and solar activity fluctuates.
It
as I
does.
understand, and we can do nothing about it. And the reason I know it is changing is because summer has come really early this year. But the belief that if we all stop using our cars and stop using oil and gas, the climate will fix itself magically because it's all due to the emissions of one single chemical compound. This is bonkers.
I was going to try to get the clip from there was a senator that was interviewing Kerry, and Kerry was saying, well, from 1800 to now, the CO2 parts per million were this. And then he said, well, what about the previous million years before that? We were fine without humans interacting. He goes, well, that doesn't matter. I'm like, so timelines and data matter depending on when you pick your data. And that fit right into what you were saying. So, hey,
can I make a comment? Just really quick. No, how dare you? Don't be Greta on me. I was thinking that a lot of these people, when they're talking about how they want us to live, and they're worried about the weather and all this kind of stuff, I keep thinking these are people stuck in the ice age. Because when the ice age and the emissions were much, CO2 was much lower in the atmosphere, and there wasn't as much green, and it was really icy. And I could just imagine these people standing there when the glacier started melting, saying, no, don't melt. Put out your campfire. You're melting the glaciers. I feel like that's the situation we're in, where it's like, stop driving your car because it's going to change the sun's output or something.
Yeah.
No, I love that. In fact, we've got a LinkedIn user, and I'm not sure who you are, Mr. LinkedIn user, but you've had some good questions coming in.
So go to the third comment, because I think, it's going to be too complex to try to go through that. But our domestic major oil companies used to report all of their reserves and supply demand in barrels of oil equivalent, U.S. imperial units. Does anyone know when the standard switched from volumetric to mass units of measure? Well, I think that's been a switch that's been led by these globalist organizations like the IPCC and the International Energy Agency. And all I can think is that it's designed to obscure things, because it makes it so much harder, even for those of us who have been in the industry forever, like me, to really understand what you're talking about when you're talking about tons of a liquid, okay, rather than volumes, which is how we've always talked about it. So it's obviously an attempt to obscure data, and I wish it would stop. Particularly people in the United States should refuse to do it, because it's just an obvious effort to obscure the message about the growth, I think, of use of petroleum. And,
but have they actually switched? I mean, the companies I think
Well, the
companies
companies
still
still,
report their numbers in barrels
yes,
of oil equivalent.
yes,
No,
because that's
metric.
what the SEC regulations that govern the
Mm.
reporting of reserves require. So, yeah, I mean, at least in the United States, the big oil companies continue to report things. But apparently, I think these globalist organizations are just trying to obscure the data and ensure ordinary people can't really understand it.
Hey, if you, it's not who, it's not who goes out and votes, but it's who counts the votes, right? So it's if you have the, how you have the data designed, it's who manipulates the data, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
You sure it's megaton? I don't know how
No,
that
Yeah,
came out under my name.
I've got it here.
I think
It
it's
says
metric ton.
megaton of no
a
megaton
megaton.
Oh, it's megaton. Okay. All
megaton
right.
of
I've
oil
only ever
equivalent.
heard
Look,
about
I didn't even
megatons
type that and I was right.
nuclear bombs. No, really,
Travis-
I haven't seen megaton in another context. What are these people doing?
it's
Exactly.
hydrogen bombs, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a megaton.
Well,
Well, and it's like in the data report there that we're talking about, they talk about exajoules. They convert stuff into
Oh, that's my
exajoules. It's
favorite
like,
grid.
Who
Because
knows what the
everyone
hell a
totally
exajoule is?
understand.
who even knows what
Yeah.
a joule? Most people like
I can barely
So-
speak English, let alone all this other stuff. Poor boy from Oklahoma.
But I don't want us to go before we get this. LinkedIn user totally agrees with me, and that's Travis Lynn, who I believe is a petroleum engineer. Thank you, Travis.
Oh, David, you make
Travis
me
Lynn,
so
petroleum
proud.
engineer.
I'll tell you what, for
Well, whenever
everybody
somebody
that-
agrees with me, I have to acknowledge it.
I do. You're a legend in my mind, David. So when you wake up in the morning, you know that Stu Turley thinks that you're like a good dude. So rock on. Hey, let's get rolling over to our stories here. And as we get rolling into our stories, though, we have the 4th of July coming up, and we all have talked about the energy transition. Really, you got to have, in order to have a transition, you got to have a smooth plan. So you just can't kill fossil fuels, right? You just can't go poof, no fossil fuels for you. And I would actually love to see New York, California, in Germany, all those in favor of making them the test bed of no gasoline or diesel sold in those states. I think it'd be fun. I think we should do that. But here's what I think the energy transition is doing right now. So this is 4th of July coming up, and I just love this one. This is a smooth energy transition.
You cannot stick it in the ground. It's not going to work. Who did that?
Can you imagine? Okay. That is what I call it. Don't
That
you
looks-
know?
It looks like a lithium-ion battery manufacturing plant going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And we have Irina. Your stories are up first.
Yeah, the first one I referenced earlier, how companies are starting to back away from green targets. Companies are realizing those targets were unrealistic, unacceptable financially, and plainly impossible. So now they're starting to revise them, reassess them, and basically ditch them. And Financial Times is really surprised about it, and it quoted a former BP executive. I don't want to see myself on the whole screen, Stu, please. It's weird. It's like I'm talking to myself. So this former BP CEO was suddenly he's very, very transitiony. He's all in favor of the transition, regardless of the fact that he used to head one of the biggest oil companies in the world. And they quoted him as saying that we shouldn't do this, that companies should keep pushing for the transition because otherwise it's climate apocalypse or something. So there are still many people in positions of some kind of power who refuse to acknowledge the actual physical reality that this is not happening because it cannot happen. And there was this lovely quote from the CEO of Unilever, who said that basically we didn't know what we were talking about when we set those targets. We underestimated the scale and the effort that would go into hitting those targets. Really? Is there nothing like forward planning? Nothing like, I mean, any planning. They just set those targets and thought they're done. And now that regulators and lawmakers are pushing for verification and substantiation of transition claims, suddenly they're realizing that this cannot be done. I'm sure we're
They'll be
all
held, yeah, because they'll be held liable for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the
Amazing.
new
It's one thing to talk about something, it's a very different thing to actually get down to doing it. Yeah.
right, yeah.
We love
Joanna
Okay,
said
well-
planning. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, apparently a lot of people don't know what that means.
I'm guessing that former BP CEO was Sir John Brown.
Yeah.
Of course it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that explains a lot.
Well,
Has he always
interestingly,
been like this?
about 3 years ago at Davos, I think it was the sustainability person for Unilever. I can't quite remember what his name was. And he was talking about how they were putting together this huge team in order to be able to track all the emissions up and down their supply chain. And that he's like, we've got like 1,000 people working on this and we're struggling. And he said, I don't know how smaller companies will be able to do this. I thought that was quite telling, and that was 3 years ago.
Wow, an ounce of common sense. Amazing. The
Goodness
second
gracious.
story is my favorite. That solar can provide 20% of world electricity on northern summer solstice, think tank says. The think tank is, of course, Ember.
Of course.
And the story said it was delicious. It's like a joke. It's worthy of a Monty Python sketch or something. So solar can generate 20% of world electricity on northern summer solstice during peak peak production hours.
Right.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Brilliant.
It's very
Good.
meaningful. It's groundbreaking, life-changing. And this is being reported on as news,
Yeah.
which really stunned me. Because this is...
What's that
Okay.
publication, Irina, that it was in?
It's Reuters.
Reuters. Yeah.
Oh, it's Reuters. Yeah, well, of course it is.
Factual reporting from Reuters.
Yeah, well, they do better than some, like the Financial Times, but they're all in the tank. They're all basically
Kind of.
going down the
Yeah,
same direction.
yeah.
But Tammy, like you were,
Reuters.
oh, sorry, Tammy.
Reuters is a member of Covering Climate Now. Just so you know.
Yes, of course they are. Yeah.
Covering
Yeah, but
climate
maybe not
now.
doing so bluntly. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're talking about a few hours, one day of the year.
Yeah. But that's the goal of Covering Climate Now, is that you push out these stories that promote the transition and condemn oil and gas, and you do it sometimes in a subtle way, and other times like this where they fet a clearly ridiculous report and then say,
Yes.
"Oh, a think tank says," yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
and so
use
what's
this
the goal?
subtlety, because this is like a hammer on the head.
Right. And the goal of that headline is so that, low information people will read that headline because they don't ever read anything else but
Yeah,
headlines.
Yeah.
And they're going to
Precisely.
go have dinner with a bunch of people tonight at a restaurant. They're going to say, did you know that solar is providing
Solar's so
20% of
great.
our electricity?
Yeah.
Oh,
I read it in Reuters. It has to be true.
did you
Right.
say low in what? Low what?
Low information voters, Democrats.
Oh, thank you. I thought you just said my in-laws. Okay.
Same thing.
Sorry about that. Okay. Here we go. David, I tell you what, your stories just cracked me up today. I loved Irina's stories, but David, this picture of Putin, look at Putin. He looks like he just, he's the cat that ate
Cat that
the
ate the
canary.
canary. Yep.
And then
Yeah.
Biden looks like
Absolutely.
he's just
Ice
did
cream.
something in his pants again. But I got a secret video. We all saw that last week? Kim Jong-un and Putin met. And I want to just say this and go on the record that they met for energy security, and they're sticking it to the United States' nose. And they're basically going to put a pipeline in from North Korea all the way through to South Korea. Then it's going to also go into Japan. And then they're going to make sure that Japan gets connected in up there so Japan can get onto Russian gas. I want to go on record and say that this was a very, very important meeting. And David, I can't believe that we found this video. So let's get back to the story here and take a look at the video.
And then he shit his pants and wandered off like he saw ice cream truck, just like little retarded boy.
Okay, so you have the leaders of Russia and North Korea, and then he's saying, like little wanders off like little retarded boy. I'm sorry, that was funny. Sorry.
Yeah, also sad, but
Also sad, yes.
Thank you.
My story is about the fact that Russia. So, I mean, this all plays off the stupid, idiotic, unjustified pause in LNG permitting that Biden enacted or his handlers enacted in January. And the fact that U.S. supply of natural gas to Europe has dramatically dropped every month since then, from 22% of Europe's supply to now less than 19 or 15% of Europe's supply. And in May, for the first time in more than 2 years, Russia supplied more natural gas to Europe, despite all the sanctions, all the wars, all the killing and destruction. Russia supplies more gas to Europe than the U.S. So there was that story. The other one, of course, was about Fiscal filing for bankruptcy. The fourth pure play EV company in the United States to file for bankruptcy so far this year. Rivian is on the verge of bankruptcy. Lucid is on the verge of bankruptcy. Nikola is on the verge of bankruptcy. By the end of this year, every pure play EV maker in the United States, except for Tesla, will either be in bankruptcy or teetering on the brink. I suspect they'll all be in bankruptcy by the end of the year. And, and why? It's because the market isn't there. The market is not for EVs. The market is for gas-powered cars and diesel-powered cars, because those are the things that work, and everyone knows they work.
Yeah.
And they're cost competitive, and that's going to continue to be the case for a long time to come. So those are my stories.
And they're being outcompeted by, or whatever. If you're going to have any EVs, people will want to pay the cheapest price, and China is dominating that market. And it doesn't matter even if people don't want them, because the Chinese government is underwriting it. They'll just keep making them. So.
Yeah, there's a article that came out. I can't remember where it came out from. It was climatechangedispatch.com, and they said that 46% of Americans who own EVs want to go back to a standard vehicle.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's very good. Not very good for the EV revolution.
That was a
once again, it's completely unexpected.
Completely, yes. What a surprise.
Yeah.
Tammy, I absolutely love this picture. And for our podcast folks, I was trying to zoom in on this guy. If you look at your picture, the fossil fuel opponents score a victory in UK Supreme Court ruling. If you look at him, he looks like he's the only one that made money on that court ruling. He is the attorney for them that lives in a van down by the river. That man's suit is wrinkled, and he hasn't changed it in all these years. And it was absolutely a hoot. So the only winner out of this fossil fuel lawsuit was that man right there. Sorry.
Yeah. It's go figure. I'm not surprised that would be the look. So this story is the UK Supreme Court. It's interesting. The UK never had a Supreme Court until recently, and they created this Supreme Court because before it was, based on common law or whatever. And so now there's this Supreme Court. And unfortunately, it ruled that there's just a little bit of oil production in a field, in an oil field in Surrey, near the London airport. And it doesn't produce very much. And they wanted to have a few more wells, I guess, or something. And they just talked about the emissions from producing the oil. And the activists, of course, took it to court. And they got the Supreme Court to rule that any project must take into account Scope 3 emissions. And that's the emissions of actually using the oil. So now a company, and this is what's happening with these sustainability standards that everybody thinks is just blah, 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 but it's real and it's here. And now we have a court ruling on it. And this is what activists in Canada have been trying to get courts to rule on, whether it's the Competition Bureau or the Advertising Standards Council or whatever. It's all over in the Western world. And that is to make companies responsible for the emissions of people using their products. And I think this is just an absolute travesty and I don't see how oil and gas production in the UK, in the North Sea or whatever, can continue, because the activists will just sue now. They'll sue the other ones that have already had permission. So I see possibly the UK's production being phased out rather quickly.
Yeah.
Just based on this.
Wow.
So.
Maybe now we know why Shell and BP are considering being listed on U.S. stock exchanges instead of the UK's.
Right, because one of the other elements is that the UK is bringing in these sustainability standards, which of course makes you account for your Scope 3 emissions. Right. But now that the court has ruled that you actually have to, it's not just that, oh, look, we have this number. It's like, no, you're responsible for that number. And that affects whether or not you're going to get investment or financing. So that's an important ruling that is stupid. and
wow.
Yeah, so it sets a bad precedent in the UK. And now other jurisdictions will say, oh, well, look what they did in the UK. See, we should do that too, which is how they seem to do things these days.
Yeah.
And then the other story, it was about a week ago, I guess. I think it was around June 12th or 16th or something, that the BBC climate disinformation person did a hit piece on Jasper Machago, who Irina's had on her podcast. And
we should have this one too.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should, I think that would be really important. But so the BBC just went after him, calling him a climate denier. He's raising money in order to bring clean water and electricity to his community. And they're trying to say, oh, he's getting it from oil companies or something. It's stupid. But this is where we're at, where you disagree with what the narrative is or whatever. And you get try to be deplatformed or whatever by the climate disinformation czar at the BBC. And how they did this to Jasper reminded me of the BBC guy going after the president of Guyana. Do you remember that? But
yeah.
does
the BBC do anything other than propaganda anymore?
No. I don't think so. It's so sad. It used to be this amazing institution that has just been eroded and corrupted over time. Yeah. And it reminds me sort of the IEA, and maybe where the report that we're talking about today might head. So, when you have all of these institutions that had such credibility and has slowly been eroded and corrupted over time, I think that does the world a disservice.
Tammy, did you see the one note or there was a guy that was being interviewed, and I just went by and I saw it just real quickly. And by the time I went back, it was down or taken down or something. But he says, don't you know Canada is already net zero when you take a look at the amount of CO2 that the trees remove, anything that Canada does, we're already net zero if you leave our trees alone. I thought it was an outstanding because he went by the numbers on that.
Right.
Oh yes, there was
And-
yes. He actually did the calculations based on what one tree removes in
Right.
terms of CO2. Yeah, I've seen this.
except the way that they've decided the global carbon budget. And so because
Yeah.
they've decided what everybody's share of emissions are or whatever, it doesn't matter because they've already taken that into account and it's distributed. And so we have what's our share. And so we have this little itty bitty budget that we're supposed to meet or whatever. And
Yeah.
you know,
That's like
that's
the president of Guyana. I love him, and I would love to have him on our podcast here because his
It's hard to get an
response-
interview with. I've tried for months. He's really hard.
he was classy. I loved his response.
So
Yeah.
I think that hell, I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind.
I wanted to say that what this BBC climate disinformator did to Jusper, it actually backfired and expanded Jusper's reach. Now a lot more people know about him and about what he's doing, which is unashamedly campaigning for hydrocarbons for Africa.
yeah.
Which
you know,
was
he's an
always
apostate.
necessary. Yeah.
He's an
He's an
apostate
apostate,
because
right.
he used to be with Greenpeace, right? And seeing
Oh, yeah,
how
yeah.
it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, I remember what I was going to say. We can't talk about trees taking carbon out of the atmosphere because there's no grift. If you talk about trees, there's no possibility of transferring wealth from talking
Yeah,
about
it's not very
trees.
lucrative.
So they
except
have
with
to be
natural
excluded from the equation.
assets, natural asset companies.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
the
yeah,
grift.
that's true. Yeah.
Are you saying there's grift in the world, David?
I'm saying the whole world appears to be based on grift at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, and again, we already saw that one. I'll tell you this one, on this one really kind of gets my nerve worked up. Democratic dark money group, pumping money into green groups and Biden's super PAC. This one just kind of drives me nuts.
Yeah.
We sit back and we take a look at the numbers on this. The Civic Involvement Fund has operated in the shadows of an apartment unit in Brooklyn since 2019. And the amount of money that they've given to the Democratic political machine is amazing. The Civic Involvement Fund got its start with a single anonymous 10.7 million contribution in its 2019 tax year. The fund is 2 contributions over 24.5 million. So green energy and political graft is a wealth transfer, and it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And that's
letting
only
me
one.
rant. Thank
That's
you.
only one of them.
It's just one of dozens. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and that, that $10.7 million came from one of a handful of suspects: George Soros, Tom Steyer, Mike Bloomberg, Bill Gates.
Yep.
It's a very limited subset of billionaires who fund all of these things.
And the 369 billion climate change investment fund, authorized by the Inflation Reduction Act by Podesta, who is a non-elected nor certified chowderhead, person. Anyway,
He's
I
a
get
very
all
bad human being.
Yes, he is. And then the other story was 5 million. This is from the Energy Bad Boys Substack. These two young guys are pretty funny. I like Isaac Orr and Mitch Rolling. The EPA's ineptitude in Southwest Power shows the agency has no idea what it's doing, and it's the regulatory actions of the EPA. The article actually is 5.2 million Americans will be left in the dark by EPA's carbon rules on power plants. And I mean, they've done their homework and they really lay it out and explain what the EPA is doing, which is pathetic.
Yeah.
boy. So if women controlled, we just really, okay, how about that bad dog? Now what? Guys, I have to admit, my wife, I'd be dead meat without my wife. Now, if women, here is a video, and I think that this is, if women actually could run some things, this is what happens when men run the place without women. And I think this is what's happening to the energy transition. So let's go ahead and see this. We absolutely need women to take over this. So, ladies,
There's an awful lot of truth in that.
Yeah,
Actually.
well, Ursula von der Leyen is a woman, so.
do what?
Ursula von der Leyen is a woman, so.
That we know of.
Oh, come on.
It was a joke. It was a joke. But I don't know what else we're going to be doing here.
I want to ask everybody if you saw the video of the Just Stop Oil protesters who disrupted the golf tournament Sunday. Have y'all seen that one?
Oh no! How'd that
go?
Go
Out and Google protesters at the Travelers.
Oh, they did it with smoke bombs.
Yeah, well, they rushed the 18th green, and they all were wearing T-shirts that said "No golf on a dead planet." And I saw that and I thought, you idiots, you morons. I mean, the planet has never in our history been as green as it is today.
Yeah.
The planet is more alive today than it's ever been.
Wow.
Well,
And these idiots.
Don't disinform people. Greenland was called Greenland for a reason. Greenland,
yes, well, that's true. Greenland used to be green.
So
that's
it
true.
used to
And now
be
it's icy.
greener some time ago.
That is true. But globally, we've had an amazing greening of the planet, thanks to the rise in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere over the last 60 years. It's undeniable. Everyone is forced to admit it. No one can deny it. And
are you saying CO2 is food for plants?
It's plant food, folks.
Wow.
It's plant food. This whole exercise is an exercise in
it makes life
insanity.
on Earth possible.
Yes.
But maritime rules, and I agree. We've got to eliminate pollution, and let's eliminate and really cut down the harmful sulfur emissions and those things. I'm all in. I'm not just let's go produce.
Real pollution.
Yeah, but these are different things.
Yeah.
It's a very
carbon
different
monoxide is not pollution. It should never be regulated as such.
So. Well, with that, Tammy, what do you have coming around the corner for this next week?
I'm working on an article.
Okay.
I don't want to say what it is until it's finished. So
okay. Well, we'll look forward to it.
How about David? What do you got coming around the corner?
Oh man, I'm just blowing and going, just having fun.
And Irina, how about you? Boy, you guys are like pulling teeth as a trying to put me on the spot for a podcast host. I'm over here with my puppet animals going, okay. And Irina, what do you have going on?
Well, nothing specifically. I go where the news flow takes me. So
I think we're all in that boat.
We'll see where this flow goes.
I have never been in such a news cycle like we've been in the last 2 years. You can't buy this kind of entertainment. And yes.
Sorry,
yes.
I wanted to add here, maybe this is something y'all should keep an eye out for. Last week, the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank for central bankers, released its Basel III platform, which is basically telling central banks they have to take climate risk into account and make sure that there's enough money and whatever for stranded assets and all those other kinds of things. So it's interesting that where that shift is going.
that fits right on into what I'm watching, and what I'm watching is there is $507 billion in banks in the U.S. that are in danger of closing. And there's 26 different commercial banks that are doing commercial loans to corporate area, and that just goes away into this darkness, and nobody's talking about it. And it's kind of like, we got some real problems going on, but the mainstream media and you can't get any information on this stuff is just nuts.
Oh, I tell you what we got coming up. We got an election in the UK on July 4th.
Oh, yeah.
We have elections in France from somehow the elections in France last from June 30th through July 7th. And I'm not sure how that works.
They got to count more votes when they mail them in.
And they're going in, and the results are going to go in diametrically opposite directions. France is
because they always
going
have the
to right.
runoff.
Huh?
They have a
What?
runoff, so they'll do the first round, and then
Okay.
when
All right.
things don't, whatever, then they do a
Yeah.
runoff, and it's in the runoff where all the manipulation happens.
Anyway, it looks like the Labour Party is, the UK is about to elect the communists. So, boy,
I know.
it's going to be
Maybe
a
I'll
dark,
be spending
dark
more time in
the
Canada.
UK. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, with that cheery thought, please like, subscribe, follow Irina Slav on her Substack, irinaslav.substack.com. Follow Tammy on thenemuthreport.com. Follow David Blackman on blackman.substack.com. And I'm Stu Turley. You can find me on energynewsbeat.com or the energynewsbeat.substack.com. All right. So with that, we will see you guys next week with some entertainment.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Adios. Thanks, everybody.
Have a
Bye.
great week.